I would like to welcome Rochelle once more,
and
also Dr. Rashmi for conducting this session. A warm welcome to you, Rochelle.
When I lived in Kalyan, I come from a small town, Kalyan, before I came to Bombay. I always fantasized and dreamt of being a student at St. Xavier's. And look at the fun, I never became a student at St. Xavier's. But somehow I'm on the board, and somehow I'm teaching at Iowa University, but I never became a student of St. Xavier's. So sometimes you have to be very careful what you dream, because you can get more than that, a lot more than that. And you must have the stamina to then accept it. Thank you so much for all that. And Dr. Rashmi, to answer your questions. So it's interesting that you like the visual poems, because I write in screenplay formats, in short stories, flash fiction, haiku. I think haiku is the most difficult form to write in. But sometimes there are thoughts that you can't even put in a haiku. You can't put them anyhow, but you want to encapsulate a galaxy perhaps, an era, a historical canvas. And even though poems, I think, are richer than sometimes a novel, because they can synopsize so many things on the page. I think they synopsize a galaxy on a page. But sometimes a visual poem does more than that. So for me, when I was running out of words, and imagine me running out of words. Imagine any writer and poet running out of words. Because words are our raw material and we have plenty of them. We are blessed with our own syntax and vocabulary. Everyone's syntax and reservoir of words is different. And that forms your original voice. That shapes your original thoughts. So imagine me running out of words, and I was like, this idea wants to be in visual form. And it encapsulates much more than I could have said in 3 pages of a poem. For example, I'll take the first one, the one that you mentioned on Abraham Maslow's pyramid. So this was always supposed to be so many things that I couldn't say in words. I couldn't say even in a short story. I could say in a screenplay, but it would take me 100 pages. So in this, it becomes very simple. It's a tilted pyramid, the Abraham Maslow's pyramid of needs hierarchy. And while you are thinking about it and viewing society, you see that most of the men, because the men are the CEOs and the prime ministers and presidents, they take the most decisions even today. There are women, but the men are at the helm. And they might be achieving transcendence. What happens on the lower rungs? Where are the women then? In a very simplistic way, they are on the lower rungs. And many of them have everything to do with their bodies. Women are still not considered to be minds everywhere. Otherwise, they would not have so much of violation to their bodies. It would have been on an equal playing field of the mind to mind. But it is always the woman's body. And so it was represented as pregnancy or vulnerability. And you also see assault on one end, which is here, which is the hand that is assaulting. And then these dots are the blood dots. And you will see 3 kinds of men actually, because all men are not the same. So you will see the man who's transcending, but he has his back to the whole chaos, because for him he's transcending. So he is not interested in anything happening, which again is a matter of concern. Because if the men of the world don't tilt the pyramid back, then this is going to be the state forever. And then you have at these rungs the women who are being gazed at by primitive apes. And the primacy of the apes is such that it is revolting, it is assaulting, it is violating, it is nauseating. Even to look at it is nauseating. And then you have these monkeys, these 3 monkeys at the bottom of the base of the pyramid. They are the ones who are tilting it the most, because they don't even understand the ABCs of life and living and existing. So we have different categories of men to women. Of course, this is not really on gender politics per se. It could be minority to majority, dominant cultures to suppressed cultures. It could mean anything, but somehow the man-woman shape with the pyramid just did it for me. And that's how I kind of did a kacha drawing in my manuscript. And I had to tell my, the editor's graphic designer of my publishing house of what texture I wanted. So this is redrawn by the graphics person. And this one really resonated, unfortunately, during the car medical assault, because I had happened to post this at that time, because I keep posting my poems. You see what a social media habituated person I am. So it had unluckily been at the same time, and it resonated. So sometimes I also wonder about, unfortunately, how work resonates or art resonates with society. Many times it doesn't. Yeah. So this is one. I can talk about the other visual poems if you wish now. So the Parliament poem, which is the Parliaments of Variety, is a very simple observation of society wherein you try to see what are the varieties of people. And not just, they may not be the labels or the hashtags. It's just that they're categorized like that, because now we started to hashtag everybody. And we reduce them sometimes because a human being is so wide and grey and vast and infinite. And you need to just categorize them as hashtag bigot, hashtag whatever, like, nationalist, hashtag patriotic. So we go about hashtagging because this is the day and age of less attention span. So I was like, okay, what are all the hashtags? What are all the people actually sitting in this parliament? And then I went and found everyone from sexual orientation to political ideologies. Everybody is here. I think this is a room full. Yeah. And it's called the Parliaments of Life, Parliaments of Variety, and in the center is life. The other one is a Me Too movement. Now again, the Me Too movement, which is we're having the second Me Too 2 movement just starting. And I don't know how many more waves will be required to change things. But this was more to do with the first one, wherein it's very simple. I drew this graph in a different direction. It's supposed to be, you generally have business graphs going in this gradient. So I have it going this way. The middle fingering is like, if you see in the x-axis, you have the exposed offenders, that is the men in units. And on the y-axis, you have the loss of opportunities for women. And now you see that the middle fingering is the most if you're not losing any opportunities. It's a little lesser if you're losing some opportunities. And if you're losing a lot of opportunities, your middle fingering is the least, because you have to think so many times as a woman as to, I have worked for so many things. I've come out of the kitchen just some decades ago to make opportunities and a career for myself, or a path for myself. How much should I lose? Should I lose everything to point fingers at this man who's in a bigger position? So that, weighing of opportunities and losing them is how the middle fingering is going on. So, and this is true even today. I think yesterday I was discussing with a friend that how we cannot still expose powerful men. Yeah. We cannot still do that. So, and without losing opportunities. So, it's still something we weigh. So, this could only be captured like this, because how else do I get it?
Yeah, it's very interesting because it leads to a lot of questions, and it's great that we have you in front of us talking about these visual poems. But even otherwise, when it's out, as you said, the outsidership, there's so many questions that one can work with, and also many interpretations. So thank you very much for those poems. My second question is it's about the style of your style, basically, and some of my observations were, I think this is a feature I noticed not just in your poems, but also in some of the short stories I ended up reading, Arithmetic of Rest, for example. There is this cataloging of words that's style, that's something regular in your writing.
Yes.
For instance, Harry Mendonça.
Yes.
He the consumer of Amul butter, Limca, Lipton tea, lover of crackjack biscuits, Gold Spot, Parle-G, and Old Monk, and it goes on.
Yes.
And you find that style in many poems,
Right.
and also your writings. So, is there any other favorite aspect of stylistics that you spontaneously use in your writings?
Yes. Thank you for observing that, because even my friend Selma Carvalho, who's written the foreword for Bombay Hangovers, mentioned this as one of my writing traits. So I think for Harry Mendonça, this cataloging, it might have come at its best, but I think it was to do with I wanted to have an obituary of Harry Mendonça, but in a funny way. I wanted to show two things. One is the gossipers who are there at all the funerals. They're there at all the weddings and all social events, but they're there at the funerals. And they have the spiciest gossip at the funerals. They're not interested in that dead body. They're never interested in that dead body. But they want to gossip about his life before and after. And they are also storytellers of an immoral kind. And who knows whether I am as moral a storyteller either, because I'm noticing them. You see, so it's not ending anywhere near. And so I wanted to italicize the gossiper on one side by having it in italicized. So, maybe some of you can read that out aloud, or I can do a little bit of enacting later to show you how the gossiper is doing it. And what I wanted to do on the other side is also not quiet. It's of course a priestly kind of thing happening, but there also, while this person is saying shh, to the gossipers, this person is also cataloging the person who's dead by what they have consumed, all the brands they have consumed in their life. So this is about the 1980s. So all the brands that were there in the 80s and the 90s that Harry Mendonça might have consumed, from hair oil to toenail cutter, I don't know what all, and he is being catalogued by his brands. Because I think that's what we also are to the capitalistic, consumeristic world, right? We are like, aapki toothpaste mein namak hai? We are that, right? I mean, kaun sa toothpaste use kiya hai? Because we are all consumers, and we are also looked at, like I just recently, 2 days ago, came across a comment saying, oh, now perimenopause is a very interesting segment that no one is covering. So there will be new medicines and products and feel-good things for perimenopause and postmenopause, because why not capitalize on the woman's phase, that phase? हमने beauty और ugliness का तो कर ही दिया है business. We had armpit rolls, we had everything. Things that didn't exist also were made and brought for a product. Under eye gels and whatnot, like what have you. So why not perimenopause? So I thought, okay, if we are such brand consumers, then what if his obituary was all about brands? And that turned out to be very funny when it was enacted, and even when I read it, because it's too much. But then that is what we have become, right, as human beings, too much. Look at your dressing table, and then you tell me, how much have we become? Look at your wardrobe and tell me how much we have become. So Harry Mendonça is that. Otherwise, the cataloging, I think sometimes I find so much of stimuli when I want to describe something that I'm like, how can I leave this out? So I get into that comma, like this, and I want to cover a lot. Maybe that's a bit of overwriting also, but I do suffer from that kira.
Would you like to read something for us?
I don't mind reading Harry Mendonça, but it's a little longer piece. Will that be okay? Because so many of the poems have already been kind of...
If you want to read just a part of it, maybe?
Yes. Okay, I'll read the whole one. I'll perform it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there are some performance pieces that... I never knew I was a performance poet. I always thought I was a page poet. He, the consumer of Amul butter, Limca, Lipton tea, lover of crackjack biscuits, gold spot Parle-G, an old monk and bagpiper on Christmas Eves. They found in his side cupboard 20 styles of brooms. Flowers, donations, condolences may be offered at 23rd room, first floor, St. Joseph Colony. Thank you. It's a bit of a long word.
But it's very entertaining, although it's a poem that reminds one of her funeral, but there are these dark poems and also the dark humor that one associates it with. And as you said, it is true. I mean, you see gossip as part of the most serious occasions.
Yes.
So,
and the spiciest of that.
Yes. I'm sure I'll throw it open to the floor as well as any questions. Anyone ready with any questions? Because I could continue. Anyone wants to ask any questions?
I will entertain you all at the end with one more poem like that. I call it my Badmash pieces.
Yeah, Freya, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for reading that so beautifully, the poem. So I think the title of the poem, the title of the book, the manuscript when it was ready, see, as we know, I mean, how many of you write poetry and stories or fiction here? Quite a many, right? So the difference if you write two forms. That poems you can't outline and think and plan and write them piecemeal. You can't say, I'll write one stanza today and another stanza tomorrow. You write them in one exhalation whenever you write them. But a story or a screenplay might be, or a novel might be written in piecemeal. You can write them in multiple sittings, you can have outlines, you can have plans, or you can just fly off. But you do them in multiple sittings. So when I had exhaled, you could say, all these poems, 80 to 100 of them, whatever, I remembered a publisher who said that when you have these many poems, you have a book. Don't keep writing, like stop at some point. So I stopped. I kind of was sectioning them, but before sectioning them, I thought they were, for me at this point, this is my third or fourth book of poetry. So by now I have understood that a poem is something that either disturbs you or amuses you. That's why you write. That is the stimuli. So it's not like if nothing does nothing to you, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to create art out of nothing. You will create art out of stimuli. It should do something to you. So I thought poems disturb. And because they disturb, they are so inglorious. So the word that came to me was, these are the inglorious coins of the counting house. So the first title was, of the book, The Inglorious Coins of the Counting House. And that title, when I submitted it to some international prizes, got a long list and short list based on that title. So a Gaudy Boy Prize is a short list and some long list at Beverly Hills Prize. But when I finally found a publisher, our editors are very marketing savvy. They said this is a very long title. Not everyone will recall. And it's really long. So why don't we make it short? That was her only condition actually. She loved the book. She was like, can we make it short? Now because I'm an MBA in marketing and advertising, and I'm not very stuck up about that, I did not debate because I saw the marketing, how do you say, the point in it. Yes, a smaller title sometimes is easy for everybody to recall. Even people who are newly coming to poetry, English poetry. You want even the laggards who have never read poetry to recall the book or come to it. So Inglorious Coins of the Counting House might be too large for some people. And so we took one of the section heads and we took that as a title. But because I had coins as an imagery, I tried to use everything under coins. Then when I sectioned the book, everything became like that. So then you would have all kinds, like first mint, and you will have every kind of, like, I went with a coin imagery. And also because I think, poets need some money, yaar.
Yeah, that brings me, I think
Yes.
the ideas just flow very well. It brings me to the next question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the honesty with which you were speaking about how you coined the name Coins in the River. So for me, the idea was, the idea of the Ganges, where children plunge in to get the coins. Maybe it's all very Masan implied, the film. So for me, literally, it meant people taking a plunge into the Ganges and fetching those coins. It also reminded me of another writer, Margaret Atwood, and her book Surfacing, where this idea of plunging into the river and coming up with truths. And I'm not sure if anybody has said this to you. It is in that section of the book that your poem becomes more it becomes reflective.
Right.
Whereas the others, as you said, are very performative, and you could. There is a lot of dynamics in the other sections. And as I was reading Coins in the River, and when I arrived at Coins in the River, yeah, it is Coins in Rivers. I felt that there was a slowing down of the tempo, and you were more reflective, I thought. I don't know if it was by design or it just happened accidentally.
Yeah, but I think in that section it's more ecological and environmental.
Yeah.
So what happens with that section, you may take any other aspect of life and you may feel more hurried because you can do things. In environment, whatever you do is so slow, it's so little that you get reflective and meditative, because how can you stop a glacier from melting? How can you stop rise in sea levels? But if there is some misogyny, you can stop it. If there's some injustice, discrimination, you can take an action. You feel empowered to do that even as one citizen in one small way. But what about the glacial melt? So I think by that time I knew that I'm so small as a human being, and we all are so small against great climate catastrophes. So you can do very little. So I think that tempo slowed down, but thanks for noticing that in a very visible way, because it was so unconscious actually.
Yeah. And that again brings me to the next idea. of this whole notion of the water being compared to the unconscious. And I think your poetry, this collection it is predominant with the images of water, rivers, ripples. So all of those images, were they conscious? Because how do you pattern this in one single collection?
Yeah. So no, thank you for that very astute observation. Actually, it's almost like you must review this book, I think, because that's such a beautiful, like oral review actually. Both the coins and the rivers. When my editor said, "Why don't we do coins and rivers?" and it was a section head, and I was thinking there's so much of depth in that, rather than Inglorious Coins of the Counting House, which was fun, which was about the poems being mischievous. But this is even more, because as you said, not just in Asia, even in the world, people, they kiss and pray and wish for coins and throw them in the river. There's humanity's hope is also found in these little things, right? We try things, we have votives, we have candles, we have ways of wishing, we have gyara gyara. How many of you believe in gyara gyara? 11, yeah, we do that. Or the number 444, white feathers. We are a very, we have that little corner of magic that we believe in, or that little serendipity, or that, because it is there. It is there. It cannot be scientifically captured all the time, but it's there. So I felt that, coins and rivers have such a big, meaning under it, because it has a wishful, hopeful thinking or dreaming. And I have thrown coins in the Iowa River just for fluke. After throwing pebbles, I threw coins. And there was a friend who said this, a poet friend from Chennai, that if a river dries up, you will find a bed of coins. That amount of wishes and prayers have gone into rivers. Okay, so that was one thing, but I feel also that, so coins are two-faced, and if they are two-faced, that means they have the stamp of the ruler or the monarch, and then it means there's a certain narrative of the hunter and the hunted. Because coins not always told you the truths of civilization. They told you the truths of which ruler ruled, and the coins were made accordingly. And even today we have chaps accordingly. So it was also the narrative of history. And it was both sides, the story of the hunter and the story of the hunted. And then you come to rivers. So when we speak about water and rivers, I feel that the creative process in itself is like a water cycle. Because, we say that you cannot write a new story. There are already stories written. There are only 7 stories in the world. There are these plot archetypes. You can't go beyond it. And yet you will find a new story every single day. You will find hundreds of new stories. You will find new ideas every day. So how did that come about then? If there were already only 7 stories in the world, from where did a new idea come to you? It came to you because it was a kaleidoscopic permutation and combination. And because it was you. The way you looked at your world is very different from which I looked, or you looked, or she looked, right? It was very different. So the kaleidoscopic vantage point caused this whole permutation combination, that even though you say there are plot archetypes and 7 stories in the world, so there can be no more, there are 100 more stories coming out every day. So I felt that it's a water cycle. It's like coming out from your personal unconscious and going back to collective unconscious. That's why storytellers and poets and writers and thinkers, they never cease and they never end. Because the ideas don't end. It's like rain. Rain will come, it will fill groundwater, swell, it will fill rivers, it will fill wells, then it will seep down. You think, okay, it's the end. But no, it's actually gone back to become a cloud. Then it's going to become rain again. So this is, I think, a whole water cycle, or a cycle between the personal unconscious to the collective unconscious, and we are never out of rain. And at least in Bombay, we are never out of rain in any case. So I felt also that a river is very close to creation myths. Whenever the world had to end, it was a flood sometimes, if not fire. Whenever the world had to begin, wherever civilizations began, there were rivers. And wherever civilizations ended, there was a desert. There was no river. There was a diverted river. Wherever rivers had to kill, they killed with floods. So I think there's a lot of things got to do with how you ideate, how you take in life, how you give, Also flow. I must tell you something about creative flow. How many of you have been in the flow of things? I know it's very abstract, but how many? Maan jao abhi. Confess. Yes, right? So the flow is something very beautiful. I hope all of you have gone through the flow. So the flow is something which doesn't care about ground and borders above, the ground swell or the aquifer below. It doesn't care about genres, whether it is poetry, prose, flash fiction, screenwriting. It is your mind, which is a large ocean. It takes in the world and it decides to put out everything. Everything seems so flowy like water when you're in the flow. So it's also creative, like in that sense. So.
I'd like to invite questions if you have any. Okay, yes, without the question.
Yeah, so I'd just like to continue something we were talking about. So as we noticed in your poetry, the text and the image work together so often. And as I was talking to you, you also mentioned cine poetry or film poetry that you produced yourself. So can you talk a little about your film poetry?
Thank you so much. So in my previous books, so I'll talk about imagery in two ways, okay? First I'll tell you about the film poem that ma'am mentions. It's called Skirt and it's on Shonda Rhimes' Shondaland. That's her blog, she had chosen it from there. But it so happened that this was a poem, Skirt. It was published in the book 4 Degrees of Separation. And once there came an opportunity of a visible poetry project where they wanted to aggregate filmmakers, poetry filmmakers and poets. And on a zero budget, I must say this, okay, because that is so important nowadays. Wherever I go to pitch my screenplays, I always hear about budget. So now there's, that new gossiper who's like, budget kya hai? It's like just always there, like somebody's not in the counting house, but counting beads, I should say, or counting bean counters. This poem Skirt is a simple deliberation on what is skirt, how long should a woman's skirt be, how short should it be, why should we tell the woman what. I can read the poem or you can share that poem, Skirt. It's from my older book. And I sent the poem and there was an Irish filmmaker who liked the poem and she said, okay, but it's a zero budget, so I'll do it from the archives. So she really actually got it from the archives. She's Philippa Colley Cousins, the filmmaker, and she actually collaged the whole poetry film from archives. So it's not done in poetry films can be shot in live. Now, we all are social media or we have AV skills, so we can do poetry films live, but she got it from the archives, assembled it together, and it was even liked by Shonda Rhimes, so that was a more like an assembled film of sorts, and nevertheless a good one. I'll send you the link, ma'am, you can share it anytime. And talking about visual, the visual imagery of poetry or writing, that comes to me from the haiku and the haibun. Not that I wasn't very visual before that, but I think practicing haiku and haibun, which are very lyrical forms, and haiku, which is so difficult because you have to juxtapose imagery, it makes you shift to visual writing. The other kind of visual writing happened when I was became a screenwriter. Because you have to shift the whole gear from prose writing to visual writing. And it's very difficult. Because at some point you'll get a small rap on your knuckle saying, we can't see this. And you're like, what can't you see? Because it is so interior for me, as a novelist or a writer. Then we can't see this. And then you're like, oh yeah, you can't see this. How can I externalize it? So this whole interiority, exteriority business happens when you shift to another form. These are the two poetry forms and screenwriting which made me visual, and that's how it changed even how I wrote poetry. Because there is of course the concept, but there is the imagery. So, and I hope I'll teach you all the haiku and the haibun. How many of you are already writing the haiku and haibun? Anybody's writing the lyrical form of haibun or haiku?
I saw one hand go up there.
Just one is not enough, but yes. Oh, I hope one day to come to teach. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yes.
Yeah, any other questions?
I haven't read your book before, but from all the poems that were narrated here, I think I noticed this really beautiful thing, that there is this place where you go to worldly issues and slowly come down, like make it very personal and close to a very, that is something that a person has lived before. It does not seem like exterior or different or separate from a person. Like even in Harry Mendoza, there's all these brands that you mentioned, and it feels like, oh, I could be this poem. I am a part of this. This is a part of me.
Yes.
So, would you talk about that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for this very fine observation. So one is the first part of your question that there are different ways in which you can outline a book. Okay, and I don't know whether you can really outline a poetry book, but there are people who have outlined books. They said we are going to only write about global climate change, and then they will write only about it. People do that and they succeed at that. For me, it can never be like that, because I feel naturally when I look back at the three books that I've written, they always follow the personal or the private, and you then expand to the concentric circles of the social and the family and the relationships, then society and the world, then even beyond the world. And I frequently say this, philosophical is almost like at one point I'm writing a poem or a story or a screenplay like a woman in the city, the woman in Bombay city. When I'm done with that, so in that comes street harassment, in that comes everything, good and bad. See, when I talk about the woman in the city, it's also sexual violence versus sexual desire. Because I think that's one question that we're constantly thinking in today's world. When there's so much of sexual violence, where do we place sexual desire? Because should we fear more? Should that be the dominant force? Or should we desire more? Because should we celebrate our bodies or should we protect our bodies? And we are constantly in that. But outside of that, the world and politics. I never thought that I would reach politics, but I started reaching world politics through simple poems like City 101 or like war specials, where there's entire catalogue of animals who are recruited in war. You have an entire catalogue of all the animals who were recruited in the war, in different wars, and from pigeons to elephants, what did they do? Yeah, and no one asked their permission, of course. Can we recruit? Would you be my soldier or my messenger? But they were recruited. And then to even philosophical, so it is like a woman in the city, a citizen in the world, and an atom in the galaxy. So when you reach the atom in the galaxy, you have disrobed your signifiers. You're no longer this person, this name, this religion, this caste, this color, this race, and then you are looking beyond all that to see what's really happening. So I think one of the key things is observing it from different vantage points, from a very personal, as I call it, the navel gazing to the stargazing. Everything, everything. Because that is who we are actually. We are not one person. We are many people. We are private people, we are personal, we are friends, we are relationships, we are social beings, political beings, then we are spiritual and philosophical beings. So how could I only write one kind? I could never be that one, tone. Yeah.
Thank you for that question and also for this wonderful answer that you gave. And in fact, my question was also similar to that. There are many political underpinnings in your poems, and you have not shied away from actual references. Say, for example, you mentioned Kailanji in So, or investigation or report where I found a lot of political references. In fact, something that is close to Mumbaikars is the RA colony episode in Partisan's village, where you talked about the uprooting of 10,000 trees. So I think you partly answered the question, but also how do you see your role as a poet in commenting on the events in the city? So do you actively do that, or it's just part of your...
See, I do it to the point that I don't reach jail. So wherever I think, okay, now there's a van coming by, I stop. Even if it's an abrupt poem, then I'll do it in visual, or I'll just write these ellipses. Why were ellipses made? They were made so you don't go to jail. No, but I think, like when I write, I don't think that I'm, so powerful as a poet writing a political piece and all, because I think so many people are engaging with the politics of the city and the country in their way. Somebody may do art, somebody may do movies, somebody may just put a simple post, somebody may do nothing but seed inside or not sleep at night. That's also political actually, because you are responding to stimuli. Mostly a poet was never patronized so much, right? So the maximum patronage is you go to jail. So the thing is that you don't think like that. What I do think is sometimes I can't stop responding, and my response perhaps is a stanza. My response might not be, like a saying on Instagram, or it might not be going for a candle march. It might be just a stanza. It might just be a word. So it's a response. It's just a response. Yeah.
I think we should have time for your Badmash poems as well. In fact, I found a litter of application and begging day very Badmash. Reminded me, and I'm sure many of our students, ideas of misconception. I think there's a question. You want to ask something?
Yeah. So we were discussing earlier, I think you were discussing earlier about this notion of humor that's present in so much of your poetry. And in conjunction with things like politics or with tragedy. I found it very interesting how you're able to make that balance and still keep it very tender. And there's this ethics of care that comes into play in your poetry that I noticed. So pretty touches on that. Is that something you intentionally place there? Is that something you intentionally balance?
Yes, thank you so much for asking this question. It's very close to my heart. Actually, everything is close to my heart. That's a sad part. But thank you so much for reading that out litter of applications so well. And yes, thank you for this question. When I became a screenwriter more, I thought of the Navarasas. Okay, it was not like I didn't want comedy in my collection, but when I became a screenwriter, you know, how many of you write screen or are studying screenwriting here? Anybody? Yeah. So you perhaps know that the Navarasas play a role, right? Not consciously. Some scenes you know that they have to be Shringara, some scenes might be giving you Hasya Rasa, some scenes might be doing this and that. You will not have a monotone. So similarly, when I was looking after being a screenwriter at this collection, I was like, hey, where's the comedy? So you know, you have some comedic pieces somewhere else, put that here, because everything is becoming so serious. So I was thinking a lot about Hasya Rasa, because we don't use as much of comedy generally. Our first response is anger to any issue, whether it is violence, whether it is politics, whether it is relationship microaggressions, we get angry. So this is our first response. But what I noticed as a creator or creative person, keep that idea back with you, incubate it a bit, and the rasa changes. So if you incubate it and don't immediately write it, of course sometimes if you don't immediately write it, you lose the idea. That's a call you take. But if you don't immediately write and you incubate, sometimes the rasa changes. So I noticed sometimes that, see, Harry Mendonça, I already had written it somewhere. I had to only put it in this collection because I realized the Hasya Rasa is missing. But there were some funny poems like Bedding Day and Litter of Application. I did think a little bit about it because I wanted to always in my life do a Nizam Ezekiel poem. Okay? Mere ko bhi karna tha yaar. Because it's like, why not? Why not do that Badmash poem where you no longer are in the corseted straight jacket of English, where you can break free. See, I am an Indian English poet. We all would be Indian English writers because we will never leave the Indianness that's there in us, which we are so proud of because of the multilingualism, the biodiversity, the diversity. We won't leave that. We won't leave our mother tongues and the way we think in them. We won't leave the music we have for them. So I'm always an Indian English poet and writer. So are you. An Indian English thinker, if not a writer poet. But I was thinking, I want to do a Nizam Ezekiel without, there was one critique about Nizam Ezekiel's poetry sometimes, in some of his poems, that he mocked the protagonist. While he mocked and had fun with the language, he ended up mocking the protagonist, so it looked like linguistic elitism. So if that was a critique, I was like, how can I do this Badmashi without mocking the protagonist? So there was a lot of duvida, a lot of conflict before I even thought about the poems. Because when you think of the poems, you have to write it immediately. There's no outlining or writing it piecemeal. So I had an idea. I realized the protagonist you don't have to mock. You mock the protagonist only if he's mockable. You don't mock him if he's not mockable, but him or her, if they can't speak good English. So that's why if you notice in Glitter of Application, I'm not mocking the protagonist. The protagonist is very cheeky. Notice the character traits of that Shankur Ram Murari. He's very cheeky. He's saying, I'm going to win the crorepati, then I'll come, then keep the school ready. We're going to do this, that and the other. He has a lot of tashan. He's not, I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing at the English. I'm not laughing at his state. I have to be so careful even before I start. So I think that comes from just like you get ready for a play. You know, they say when you're enacting plays, which point do you start from? So as a writer also, sometimes when you're walking on eggshells like this, between language elitism versus doing badmashi and playing around with English, where do you stand when you start? So I decided I'm not mocking the protagonist. And there is one place where I'm absolutely mocking him. So can I read that? Okay. So that's when I really was like, yay, now this is not something I should get a critique on, because I chose the protagonist very well. It's in Bedding Day, and we can end with that. It's on page 50. So I hope I have answered your question. So I mostly try, if possible, to see if there's some little hasya rasa, because my poems especially can get serious. In my screenplays and all, I have made sure that I write rom-coms and I write horror and I write whatever you want. You know, like, of course the Bhedias and the Munjas are done, but if I can find a beast that I can have fun with, why not? So there's every kind, but in poems I have to be a little cautious. So this one is Bedding Day, and it was a liberating poem for me because I could do my Nizam is Kill number and I could get out of the straitjacket of English, because everything else is so, and this had the most spelling mistakes, so my editor was like, are these spelling mistakes right? And I'm like, yes, these spelling mistakes should be there, okay? And it's like, I am mocking the protagonist. Bedding Day. When Santosh wanted urgent love marriage, in just 15 days, he said, I need girl only for me. She has faith fully for me. He looked for simple things. She should be a non-Facebook user, exceptionally fair, convented, or at least matric and virgin, or issueless and innocent divorcee. Completely non-feminist, but an extremist, and compassionate, patriotic to country, with a keen desire to increase India's military and sports capabilities. Expert in child raising, H1 visa no bar, powerful and rich. And congratulations, he found her. Her good name Priya from top college, 22 or 21, with a dowry of $10,000. They went for a special wedding party with all drinks included. Whiskey, vodka, gin, child beer, strong rum, then all. The marriage hall with unisex laboratories for all those gay people was near Sharma Sweets and Snakes, right side to Ames English Academy, run by Anu Sharma. In front of Santosh Taylor's alternation of ladies and gents and welcome tourist office of We Speak English. At the backside gate, visitors were welcome, only regrets to their vehicles and no encouragement of beggars. In trust we God, Santosh wedded Priya. They look like hero and heroine with their crowns, no? Said all. They are laughing so much, showing their Colgate teeth. In such a type of marriage, go slow. This is an accident porn area, said an uncle. The gifts were many. Bedsheets and Sony erection phones. Organic ghee from tension-free cows and condoms in all flavors like hot air balloons. The only villains were the in-laws who took up the best gifts in compensation. Shoplifters will be prostituted, said Santosh, making his big red eyes, but who were listening? All males and females were busy eating and drinking. Only their dead bodies will go home, he rode, neither on foot nor ambulance. Don't these people know? I am yes for Santosh, satisfaction guaranteed. Above all, vermins and men's get my special vitamins. I want 2 children, both men, yes, yens. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. This delightful to have you. And I'll now hand over the mic to Amrita.
For the sad part, I'm here to actually end the session with a formal vote of thanks. So thank you so much, Rochelle Potkar, ma'am, for taking out the time to talk to our students. Jackie Kay had very famously said that a poem is a little moment of belief in very powerful language. So thank you for sharing these moments of belief, your ideas, your philosophies in so much humor, with so much mischief, and it was very delightful. Thanks, Rashmi, for curating the poems and for orchestrating this very interesting reading with our students. I was very interested in the constellation that took place here, with them reading from different sections of the poetry collection and different parts of the room also. Thanks so much for picking the poems. Many thanks also to our TYBA students who enlivened our session today with their wonderful creative readings of the poem. As Rochelle said earlier in the day, everyone makes her poetry their own, so thanks for making each poem you picked your own. Then thanks to our technicians in the MMR. We have Das, we have Francis, we have Dinesh. Thanks for setting up the apparatus here. Thank you, Karen, for preparing this lovely presentation, these slides that animated our discussion in the background. And then finally, thank you to our lovely audience. Thank you for your apt attention. Thank you for your appreciation and for those wonderful questions. And now we'll finally call it a day. See you soon with the next session.
And thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of you, and thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
For having me.
Welcome. Love you.